Really hope that these deaths in Kenora don't go unnoticed.
Tonight, 5 fatal overdoses in Kenora generate calls for action.
Well, OBA actually originated in the village of Wolastoqey back in the 90s.
Celebrating pride and culture on the Northwest Coast. And Disney Studios reimagines Peter Pan. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. We begin tonight in northwestern Ontario, where Kenora nonprofit groups are calling for more action to help the city's unhoused population. They say permanent shelter and support for mental health are desperately needed after 5 overdose deaths happened in just 2 months. APTN's Sav Jones and Tamara Pimentel traveled to Kenora to hear their stories.
Among the tourists and bustling downtown streets of Kenora, Ontario, are the unhoused. Those living on the streets say they feel shamed by the rest of the community, making it difficult to access basic needs like housing and medical care. APTN News met with people experiencing issues firsthand. But what brought us here was the overdose deaths of multiple people in just 8 weeks. 24-year-old Benjamin Littletree O'Cheek died on January 19th this year.
He was a really nice kid, though. Like, he really looked after the underdogs. He was an incredible athlete.
His mother, Marguerite Hunt, lives in Victoria, BC. She says she spoke with her son 5 days before he died, but found out about his death through Facebook. Hunt says Littletree moved back to Kenora with family in 2019 before living on the streets.
He came into the world with a lot of trauma. Unfortunately, his dad and I were both 60 scoopers, and I feel like now that I had to sit with everything and sit with his death, looking back on who he was as a little person and how he had to deal with 2 parents that had no idea how to really self-regulate their own trauma.
She says racism and intergenerational trauma led to Littletree facing addictions, then homelessness.
Our country's inherent racism towards Aboriginal people, and not just Aboriginal people, but addicts, people in poverty. Canada just really wants to just hide that away. We're friendly here, we're kind, but we don't want to talk about the history.
Kenora, Ontario Provincial Police responded to Littletree's death. He was found unresponsive behind the ticket booth for MS Kenora, a local tourist boat that operates in the summer. OPP said it was a sudden death and deemed non-suspicious.
This is around the 67th or 68th friend that has passed away from addiction.
Miranda Elder is a peer support worker with Kenora Moving Forward. The not-for-profit organization sounded the alarm on the deaths over Facebook, saying 5 happened in 8 weeks and went unnoticed by most of the community.
It feels like we're all living in like a Russian roulette type situation where we never know who's going to be next.
Really hope that these deaths in Kenora don't go unnoticed. These were people that could have had a future, had somebody address their trauma and treated them like they weren't a problem.
The deaths have prompted an outcry for change.
But really, people are using this street as their housing.
Advocates say first and foremost, housing or some sort of shelter is needed in Kenora.
So many deaths that could have been prevented already. Right?
In our next story, we hear from James Nicanapanis of Grassy Narrows, how he ended up living on the streets and his constant struggle to put a roof over his head.
My last known fixed address would be the Kenora District Jail or just out here on the street.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Kenora.
Important story there. You can catch part 2 of this series in Kenora here tomorrow night. Was your community experiencing similar issues? We'd like to hear from you. You can reach out by sending your emails to news@aptn.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. On Tuesday, the Wolastoqey chiefs announced a partnership with a large forestry company in New Brunswick. This happened despite the company being named in a lawsuit over First Nations title to a large chunk of the province. The chiefs say the agreement is one step towards a settlement. Angel Moore reports from Fredericton.
It is clear signal that what we are asking of companies, of crown corporations, and of the provincial government is not unreasonable.
Chief Alan Polchis of Zdunsig, St. Mary's First Nation, is talking about reclaiming traditional lands, and it's why the Wolastoqey Nation announced a memorandum of understanding with a foreign-based forestry company. AV Group of New Brunswick's parent company is based in India. It employs over 15,000 people in New Brunswick and manages about 750,000 hectares of woodlands. Chief Patricia Bernard hopes the agreement changes the way business is done in New Brunswick.
Not only to other forestry companies, but to all other companies who wish to sort of do business within this province. It isn't just the provincial crown you have to sort of build a relationship with. It's the original inhabitants of this land.
The agreement includes forestry management, including Indigenous knowledge, economic opportunities, and a transfer of private land currently held by the AV Group. Government Relations Director Mike Leger says it's unclear how much land they will return to the Wolastoqey Nation.
The portions that will be given back depends on the results of the engagement with the communities. What are the cultural sensitive sites that they feel are important to them? So we don't have a number yet on that.
Meanwhile, AV Group is one of 6 forestry companies named in a lawsuit filed by the Wolastoqey chiefs in 2021, seeking Aboriginal title to their traditional territory. Chief Ross Purley of Nugudkuk, Tobic First Nation, says the MOU does not change the lawsuit.
It remains true that AV Group is a defendant of the latest version of the title claim that the Wolastoqey chiefs filed in November of 2021. This MOU is a step towards resolving some of the allegations the chiefs have made in that claim. This is a company that has shown its willingness to work in partnership with our nation.
The province and New Brunswick Power are also named in the suit. Alicia Bartlett, spokesperson for Aboriginal Affairs, had this to say about the MOU in an emailed statement. The province supports private companies working in partnership with First Nations, including the AV Group's interest in partnering and developing a more formal relationship with the Wolastoqey. Bernard hopes the MOU will lead to a settlement.
I mean, negotiation is always better than litigation. It's just it takes 2 people willing to sit down to negotiate these things, and there has to be some reconciliation. There has to be acknowledgement.
The chiefs say they are not in talks with any other forestry companies, but would welcome discussions. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Fredericton, New Brunswick.
A group of environmentalists gathered outside federal court in downtown Ottawa Wednesday. They were there in support of a court case that challenges federal approval of an oil project off the coast of Newfoundland. Mi'kmaq First Nations in New Brunswick are also against the project. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
A small group of demonstrators gathered outside federal court in downtown Ottawa early Wednesday morning. Sierra Club Canada sponsored the protest and is one of the organizations challenging the government's approval of Bay du Nord. It's an oil exploration development off the coast of Newfoundland by a Norwegian-owned company called Equinor. Connor Curtis of Sierra says Canada is simply not equipped to handle a potential oil spill a project like this could produce.
Canada as a country is just not prepared to deal with a major oil spill. They never have been in terms of the previous oil spills that have happened off of Newfoundland and Labrador. And if there were to be a major oil spill, the technology that would be needed to deal with that spill could take anywhere from 18 to 36 days just to get on site, let alone actually capping that.
George Guinish is the chief of the Nadawanag Mi'kmaq Nation. He is also the co-chair chief of Mi'kma'well Tiplukan Incorporated, or MTI, which represents 9 Mi'kmaq communities in New Brunswick. Guinish says they are concerned about what a potential oil spill could do to salmon stocks.
the downstream impacts can be huge. I mean, we look at, I guess the horror stories like the Gulf of Mexico, the oil blowout there, things like that, they really, it concerns us.
He says MTI is also frustrated that once again First Nations were not properly consulted.
And we've had this happen too many times in the past where government, will come to us at late in the game without adequate resources for full consultation. Here's a few dollars for a tabletop. Let's do something really quick that will address your concerns. It doesn't.
Meanwhile, Curtis says those who see the Trudeau government as green-friendly may want to think again.
I don't think you can call yourself green and at the same time be developing new oil projects. There just isn't the room for it. And a colleague and a researcher actually who's done research on this said at one point that talking about green oil is like talking about filtered cigarettes. They both cause cancer. There's no room for them if you want to avoid that. And in this case, the cancer is climate change.
After demonstrating in front of federal court, the group moved on to the Norwegian embassy a few blocks away. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Time to step aside for a quick break. Coming up, huge crowds gather for a big celebration.
I am very, very happy that this has happened to us.
Welcome back. Niska community celebrated Hobiye in northern BC this past weekend. It's an annual event welcoming the new harvest season. Dance groups came from all over the north to share their songs and culture. APTN's Lee Wilson was there.
Ska communities came together to celebrate Hobiye in the village of Lac-aux-Apes. All dance and cultural groups dressed in regalia drum their way into the community center and a grand entry. Samugit La, a Niska house chief, is excited for Hobiye to showcase their culture.
I am very, very happy that this has happened to us. We've been able to bring back part of our culture, and we're still doing so. We're going to continue bringing back as much as we can.
He says that in the olden days, large groups would travel to the Nass Valley to harvest oolakins, a small fatty fish important to many nations on BC's coast.
Years ago, we used to have friends here to come visit us every year. About this time, about 5,000 to 10,000 people would come here just for the oolakin.
Hobiye is now an annual event celebrating the new harvesting season. Skahatsagon shared that the cultural event, as we see it now, originated in his Niska community, Gitwinsilk.
Hobiye actually originated in the village of Gitwinsilk back in the 90s as an actual event to celebrate the upcoming moon, the harvesting season, and as a way to express ourselves culturally.
He added that this time of year, it is a Niska belief to look up at the crescent moon and watch if it's facing up or down. It can signal a good harvesting season, and they can share their preserves and celebrate.
It's like this, when it's shaped like a hobby, a spoon, it correlates that we're going to have a great year. So we're going to have great fishing, great oolakin season, berries, hunting, all these little harvesting things that we do throughout the year.
Lac-aux-Apes culture dancers performed a peace song for a group from Scotland in attendance. The National Museum of Scotland will repatriate a totem back to Niska lands later this year. Niska honored their longtime cultural directors, as well as cheering on their children and youth who fearlessly perform in front of the large crowds.
So learning that knowledge is not only a big undertaking, but it's really fulfilling as well, because you get to see all the kids give it their all, from the oldest elder to the youngest kid, just out there giving it their all, showing who they really are.
Kingold cultural dancers shook the building with a powerful performance. Their director, Sam Nelson Peel, says that is how their late elder, Rufus Watts, encouraged them to perform.
We tend to sing from our stomach. That's where all the power comes from. And in turn, he also said to dance and sing loud enough so that they hear you on the other side, and that you shake the earth as you do it.
Skahatsakan shared 10 years ago, their nation did a survey and found there were only 3 or 4% of fluent Nisga'a speakers left. The language programs and cultural groups are a big part of passing down Nisga'a culture.
More youth integrated into the language with not just at school or at cultural events, but at home now. And it's used more often, and it's become the new normal for our youth to be able to understand our language when we're speaking to them, when we're singing, what we're singing, and all that stuff. It's been hugely beneficial for our youth.
Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Lac Zap.
Beautiful stories coming from the Nisga'a communities this week. Thanks for those, Lee. Authentic Indigenous representation is becoming a bigger priority for film production companies. That's according to the Cree actress starring as warrior princess Tiger Lily in Disney's remake of Peter Pan and Wendy. The trailer for the film was released yesterday and gives us a sneak peek of the upcoming April release. APTN's Leanne Sanders has more.
Alyssa Wolastoqey grew up on Treaty 8 territory in northern Alberta. She was studying acting in Vancouver when she learned about the role of Tiger Lily. She knew it was meant for her.
When this came across on my computer, I was like, okay, this is, I kind of had like this really weird feeling like I have to tell it to everybody because it felt like it was going to happen from the moment I did it. And I was like, I don't know what that feeling is, but it feels cool.
Wolastoqey and the rest of the Peter Pan and Wendy production had Cree cultural consultant Kevin Lewis to call on for guidance. Lewis is a Cree instructor and researcher from Ministiquin Cree Nation in Treaty 6 territory, and he helped keep things culturally appropriate and accurate.
You need people where you can sort of like, okay, is this the way you do things? You know, is it close, or is it, you know, tell us if we're wrong, you know? So I think that communication is so key. And I'm thinking generations ahead.
Lewis is also the co-creator of a land-based Cree immersion school in Saskatchewan and says the film and Wolastoqey will inspire Indigenous kids everywhere.
With her, with the language, with the culture, and with the dress and the pride and how confident she is on the big screen, it's gonna just, you know, I think it's gonna spark a lot more confidence or a lot more attention to immersion programming, and that's what I want. That's what we want. People from the world want to really actually authentically see. What do the Haida sound like? What do the Dene sound like? What do the Cree sound like? What does Michif sound like?
For Wolastoqey, who is now also starring in Bones of Crows, she wants to inspire young Indigenous women.
I really hope that they could have some hope, that they could see that even though there's still all these issues going on in society, in the world, that things are looking up for us, and that you're not alone in this process, and that someone like me, I played this role, but I didn't start out, you know, I didn't start out like a big actress. I didn't have every opportunity. It was a lot of hard work.
Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Looks interesting, but boy, do I ever want to see Bones of Crows. Seems like that's been coming for a long time. After the upcoming break here, we'll take a look and hear from the first Indigenous forensic pathologist.
I'm actually one of the few people, I think, who gets up in the morning and actually wants to go into work.
Welcome back. Time now for a look at our photo of the day. This is the ice road leading to the Métis community of Île-à-la-Crosse, Saskatchewan. It was taken with a drone last week by Matt LeMay. Beautiful shot, Matt, who says it was minus 35 that day, a balmy day. You can email your photos to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, +1 and sunny in Charlottetown, 2 above with snow in Halifax. -18 in Kuujjuaq, cloudy, and -12 for Nain. +1 with snow in Montreal, -7 and flurries in Val-d'Or. -1 with flurries in Sault Ste. Marie, 2 below and snow in North Bay. -5 in Thunder Bay, Wawa and Sioux Lookout. -25 in Churchill, 9 below with snow in God's Lake. -7 in Winnipeg, 3 below in Brandon and Dauphin. -2 in Regina, cloudy and 0 for Saskatoon. +1 in Meadow Lake, -4 with snow in La Ronge. Over in northern Alberta, +1 with snow in High Level, 2 above in Fort McMurray with flurries. +5 in Edmonton, +7 for Lethbridge. 7 above in Vancouver, +8 for Victoria. +2 with snow in Prince George, snow and 0 in Smithers. -26 in Old Crow, flurries and 8 below for Whitehorse. -13 with snow in Yellowknife, -19 for Norman Wells. -30 in Saxe Harbor, 26 below for Pawlatuck. -27 in Baker Lake, 16 below with snow in Chesterfield. -26 in Resolute, 29 below in Igloolik. Earlier today on this week's episode of In Focus, we looked at some Indigenous firsts, from astronauts to the Governor General of Canada. We spoke with Indigenous peoples making history.
I dreamed about being an astronaut when I was about 8 years old, but I never thought it was something I could do until I was in test pilot school and realized that the people I used to watch on TV, I was in the same school, doing the exact same thing. So if they could do it, why not me?
I'm actually one of the few people, I think, who gets up in the morning and actually wants to go into work. You know, there's some days where I'm in the morgue and I'm doing autopsies. And there's other days where I testify in court as an expert witness. And I've recently been appointed to the National Advisory Committee on Residential Schools, Missing Children, and Unmarked Burials.
My upbringing is very significant to me, and it plays a role in my life every day, because I come from a family, like my mother was an Inuk, and my grandmother was also an Inuk, and they only spoke Inuktitut. They played a very significant role because on a day-to-day level, we learned the Inuit culture and language. My father taught us to survive out on the land as he was taught by Inuit when he first went to the Arctic.
How do you think your Indigenous perspective informs the work that you do?
I think it's how I show up. I think is the leadership approach, and I think really that is grounded on, you know, something I learned from certainly my Indigenous grandmother and my mother was, you know, a certain level of humility, that we're all equal.
And you can watch that entire episode of In Focus and much, much more over on our website, aptnnews.ca. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Wednesday. You can also download the APTN News app to make sure that you never miss a story. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow.